would like to welcome us all to our session. Welcome to the live stream of the Young African Social Workers TV network. And today we are pleased to be sharing the African Union, which has 55 member states, and their theme for this year is the Year of Nutrition. And the sub-theme is strengthening resilience in nutrition and food security on African continent, strengthening agro-food systems, health and social protection systems for the acceleration of human, social, and economic capital. Therefore, we have 3 panelists who will take us through the session. And we will start with Emmanuel. Please, Emmanuel, welcome. Introduce yourself and let us get right into it.
So I'll be making my presentation on the rights of internally displaced person in the context of social work. As we are all aware, one of the groups that we are actually concerned about as social worker are the people that have been described as internally displaced person. What does this thing represent? What does internal displacement represent? What are the challenges? Why are we concerned about it as social workers? Is it a global issue or something that is just peculiar with Africa? Or is this something of interest specifically for social workers, or something that we should not be concerned about? This is something that has been, there is no much literature about it in Africa. So that is why I felt I should use this opportunity on this day to share with my colleagues some of the gaps in the issue of internally displacement in the context of social work. And I believe that we discuss it together. This is an open discussion and we have been able to learn more and do better. Thank you very much. As we can now see here, when we are talking about this society in general, our society has been or has always been about the struggle, human struggle. And for some of us, we are familiar with Karl Marx very, very well as social workers. That is one of our theories. When we are talking about the conflict theory, he spoke well about the class struggle and how there has been challenges between the upper class, the lower class, and the middle class. So when we look at this critically, we can see that each and every society is stratified. We have groups, we have classes, and one of the groups that we are privileged to have in the society is the group called internally displaced persons. So just like people with physical disability, people with HIV, and some other groups. So, this thing has been a global debate, what the prevalence of internally displaced person, and I'll be sharing specifically about it in this meeting. And one thing that we must recognize is that when we are talking about internally displaced person, we need to first of all know what internal displacement represents. And as I've captured here, I describe internal displacement as forced movement of people within the country they live in. One thing we must know, note about internally displacement is what I call forced movement. It's a movement that they are not willingly interested in. It's something that just happened unexpectedly. It could be anything, but they were not aware of it. And the one thing is that internally displaced persons that have been making use here as IDPs, persons or group of people who are forced to leave their community, to leave their home and go to a strange land, as the case may be. And then this is not a trend that is peculiar with Africa alone. As we can all see here, according to the UN Refugee Agency, as released by May 2022, that we have more than 100 million people that are being internally displaced across the globe. And we can also see that 30 million out of this 100 million happen to live on the soil of Africa. So this is a major issue to us in Africa here. And as we can all see here, according to Kofi Annan, former UN General Secretary, he stated in 2004 that internal displacement is the great tragedy of our time, and it make these people to be among the most vulnerable group in the human family. So this is a global concern, is an African concern. And similarly, we can see that what people may be wondering, why is the challenges of IDP of a concern to us? As social workers, we are also interested in the well-being of people. We are interested in the empowerment of people. We are interested in the social functionality of people. And as I've captured here, some of the challenges that these IDPs will encounter are things like we have inadequate food, lack of shelter, poor net care facility, and among them, the women and the young girls among them, they're always subjected to what I describe as sexual violence and physical attack. Any group can attack them, and they're also vulnerable to the diseases. And for us as social workers too, one of the mental issues that we are actually interested into what depression and other psychological issues like that. So these sets of people, they experience depression a lot, and at times they say no hope in life, and at times they attempt suicide, and some of them go into death, as the case may be. And oftentimes we need to know something, that when we are talking about the causes of internal displacement, two things are taken into consideration. And the first thing is what is being called armed conflict. Armed conflict, and the second one is what is being described as disaster. The armed conflict aspect of it could be things like terrorism. As we know, Boko Haram terrorism in West Africa. We also have an issue of civil war in South Sudan, some violence, terrorism in Libya, Central African Republic, and even the civil war in Ethiopia, as the case may be. Whereas when we are talking about the disaster, we can talk about majorly the flood and other environmental issues that we encounter, mostly as a result of climate change in Africa. For instance, for the past 1 month, Nigeria, my country, has been experiencing a flood, and more than 2 million people have been affected by it. And also in Chad, we have seen about more than 1 million people have also been affected by flood. And in fact, currently now, Chad has declared state of emergency on flood. So this is a major concern to us in Africa. And as we can see the trend here, we can see that majorly the root causes of internal displacement, most especially in this part of the world, is as a result of conflict that have been described as armed conflict. So this is the major aspect of it that we call social work and IDPs. Our profession, we are interested in the well-being of people, as I've said, and the well-being of these IDPs, forcefully leaving your home. Usually you are going to a land of no hope, where you are not used to. You go there, you are just being kept in a particular place. There's no place at home. So the sensibility of that thing will still be affecting them. So that is why we are interested as social workers in their physical, social, and emotional, psychological support. And this is what we have been doing. And apart from that, as social workers, we should also know that we are also part of the multidisciplinary team that work together to ensure the safety and protection of people affected by internal displacement. For instance, we have the security agencies, we have the nurses working with them, we have the other international agencies working with them. We should know that as social workers, we are also part of this. And apart from that, somebody may be wondering that which aspect are we concerned about it when we are dealing with people with internal displacement. One thing is that there are social issues that are attached together with internal displacement. What are these social issues? we need to work together with some of all these communities affected by the internal displacement. It could be flooding, it could be anything. And what are we going to be doing? They will be using the armed conflict and disaster, majorly the flood and other environmental issues. I'll be using them concurrently. So what are we going to be doing with some of all this community? It could be conducting research, meeting with the people, using case method in social work to address some of all this issue. We hear directly from the community, and being an expert, we are part of the people that use peace resolution, conflict resolution mechanism. We are trained in that aspect to assess the situation, to determine the trend of the issue, and to work together and develop a framework that will ensure that they live and enjoying their life and return back home. And apart from that, we should also note what migration has also caused. You know, one of the issue with internal displacement is migration, and migration is an issue of concern. It's a global issue that we as social workers were also interested in. So these are all part of the multidisciplinary team functions that we perform as social workers. And as today we are looking at African Union Human Rights Day, and being a case of human rights, internal displacement is a great challenge to human rights, and as social workers, we are ensuring that they enjoy social justice so that they can be motivated and so that they can function well in their society. And since 2000, the International Federation of Social Workers has been working assiduously towards ensuring the protection of the right of people in the shackles of internal displacement. And they have been attending conference and with the African Union and the UN, the assembly, to ensure that the rights of people affected by internal displacement are protected. And somebody may be asking, what are the exact rights that we are looking at as social workers? Number one, we are looking at the right to education. We are looking at their rights to safety. We are looking at their rights to empowerment. We are looking at their rights to basic amenities of life, you know, their right to freedom, their right to speech, and some other things as social workers. So how does these things affect us, and how does they being a great concern to social work? As we are all aware, one of the core values of social work is what we call social justice. So we are ensuring that their rights are protected. We are ensuring that they live a comfortable lifestyle so that they can be part of parcel of people in the society. And the social workers too, we work to cover the spectrum of their needs, issues, and their concern. Some of them, they have depression. Some of their children, they don't have access to school. So how are we returning some of all these people? So these are all part of the issue that we are interested in as social workers. And lastly, as I have it there, what are some of the policy recommendations that we can use to a day like this to make so that social work can do better in terms of moving internal displacement to a bearable level in our society? Number one, as we are all aware, we need an indigenous roadmap for the protection and safety of IDPs across African nations. For example, if I may ask, I don't think we yet have a forum towards the protection of people affected by internal displacement. So, I mean, a social work forum that is working toward this sector. You know, this is an area that is huge and is a great concern to African continent, because we represent one third of the entire people affected by internal displacement. So how are we working together? So I'm using this medium on these days to make recommendations to us as social workers at different levels that we should come up and establish an indigenous framework that we can cascade into each and every African country so that we can protect some of these people affected by internal displacement. And secondly, I'm recommending that we should also inculcate this particular area into our academic and research field. I graduated from University of Ilorin, and throughout my study in that university, in the Department of Social Work, I've checked it again and again. We don't have a course or a research center that deals with specifically with internal displacement. This is an area that is selling across the globe, and if you conduct this study, if you have a center like this, it can generate funding for us across social work field. Climate change has been a global issue now, and if for us we are looking at this area, we are having an edge across other professions too, when we are able to come up with a framework, a framework within the academics and research field for the protection of IDPs. And lastly, concerning the some of the agency, we have the International Organization for Migration, we have the UN Agency for Refugee, we have the UNCR, and a number of them, and a number of international private NGOs too, Catholic Relief Services, and a lot of them, they are working with some of all these people affected by internal displacement. The question is, who are the people working with these people? By the time we are able to go into further studying in this area, we have an edge, and we can discover that in the next couples of years, we see that social workers are bombarding all these organizations, and we are making life better for people. So these are some of the things that we can do. And conclusively, and as social workers, we still have a lot to do, most especially in this area. We should be able to come together and make a research, because I'm always interested in research, how we can work together across the nation, not the kind of we working in disparity. We should be able to work together, have a collaboration and have a partnership. And I believe that as we do so, we can achieve more. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. That was a very comprehensive presentation. And thank you for keeping time. So we'll quickly go to our next presenter, Movin Omondi, please. Go ahead. You have your 15 minutes.
Sure, thank you so much.
Starting from now. Okay, welcome.
Thanks so much, Sharon. And thank you, Emmanuel, for such a wonderful presentation. I've really learned quite a lot from listening to you. It's impactful. So, as has been stated, my name is Movin Omondi. I'm a researcher. I'm a researcher, and also I work with a CBO called Langata Legal Aid Center here in Nairobi. Yeah, so basically that is it. My background is political science, and I've done a lot of research on human rights. So, okay, all right. Sure. So today, my perspective on the issue is that I want to discuss human rights and development in Africa. As we are seeing, all know already, it's the African Union Human Rights Day, and happy AU Human Rights Day to you all. So I'll just very fast move. So what's human rights? General definition, obviously, these are universal legal guarantees that protect individuals and groups against actions or omissions, as has been indicated here. They are recognized by the United Nations under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. There are several human rights treaties and conventions that are covered with the UN. I think we can check that later. Basically, the core characteristics actually of human rights is the fact that first they're universal, meaning that they are guaranteed to every single human being as long as they are in existence. They are inalienable. You cannot alienate anyone from them or them from anyone. They are also highly interrelated in the sense that, as Emmanuel was discussing, an IDP will require certain rights like food and shelter, and you cannot deny them either because these things are related. They're indivisible. You can't give one and deny the person the other. They're also interdependent. They depend on one another. For example, right to education will eventually help someone to attain the right and freedom to economic. Maybe after being empowered with education, someone can actually uh, get a job or acquire employment. Yeah. So the definition that I'm giving is basically from the High Commission of Human Rights. That's a UN office. Then quickly I jump into the case of Africa. The Organization of African Union in its charter of 1963. Of course, AU currently is called AU. That's why we are saying AU Human Rights Day. Was hugely invested in the principle known as non-interference, meaning that states or the organization was not into interfering in other states' businesses. That's why we see a lot of human rights abuses happening then. We had political assassinations. There are a lot of things that happen. I think all of us at least have done some history. For you to be a social worker, you have to know history, the history of the people you are serving. So that was then. Then in 1981, through a charter called the Banjul Charter of 1981 that was signed in Nairobi. I don't know why it's called Banjul Charter, but it was signed in Nairobi. I think the initiation of the talks actually happened in Banjul. I don't know, someone can just put in the chat where Banjul is found, in which country in Africa. So this charter entrenched human rights in Africa. And of course, through it, the African countries were able to now move away from the principle of non-interference. Not totally, it's still hugely practiced, but there's some shift from it to more countries adopting human rights treaties and stuff like that. However, challenges still persist, as you are all aware, in human rights regime in Africa, because of the following reasons that all of us, because at least most of us are Africans, things like political instability. We've been having like 3 coups happening in Burkina Faso, I think this year, if I'm not wrong. Nigeria, northern Nigeria still has a lot. Even here in Kenya, we have a lot of conflicts in southern Rift Valley and parts of Coast Province. So such kind of things, during a political instability situation, it's hard to monitor human rights. Then there are armed conflicts, what I was talking about here in Kenya, northern Nigeria, and a lot happening in Sahel, and even the Congo. Yeah, so that's it. Then there's leadership deficiency, whereby we do not, the accountability of our leaders and their transparency is questionable. We have poor economic planning and physical ineptitude, whereby our plans, economic plans, do not match up to actual reality on the ground. In the sense that you find the way we invest, or at least do our budgets, we do not favor human services. For example, like here in Kenya, a lot of our budget in the past 5 years has been put to big infrastructure projects. Not that I have anything against them, but obviously that takes away money from education, health, and stuff like that. Then we have rapidly deteriorating physical environment, climate change, which is a big thing. Right now in Kenya, we have not seen rain for the last, I think, 6 months. And drought is really big. So when I was introducing myself, I told you that I did research on human rights. This was at Ekima University College in 2021, where we measured human rights indexes observance across the Eastern African region. We covered Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Burundi, and we measured the following rights: freedom of assembly. I've listed them there. Freedom of religion, doctrine of separation of powers, accountability against economic crimes, and all the rest. There were 8 categories. The document is currently online on ResearchGate. You can find it. The link is also attached to this. I think you can access this presentation later, and obviously access the document. And then apparently, as indicated, I was actually covering Kenya, focusing on Africa, but specifically Kenya. So the case of Kenya is such that, of course, Kenya is a party to the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. As you noted, the focus of this year's AU Human Rights Day is nutrition. And of course, this falls under the economic, social, and cultural rights. The Bill of Rights of our Constitution has a lot on human rights, especially, and we have a lot of human rights basically in our Constitution. Then from the Covenant on Economic and Social Cultural Rights, the 11th article of the Covenant, I'll just read it first. It says that it urges parties to recognize the right to everyone to adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and continuously improve living conditions. So basically, the state obviously has the responsibility to ensure that every single individual, regardless of the country, and Kenya is part of this treaty, so at least we should be doing something about it. The issue of requirement for health, including provision for reduction of stillbirth and infant mortality, and things like that, and the healthy development of the child. And as you know, nutrition is a very important part of the development of the child. So obviously, if you have a malnourished child, it will affect the way they will develop, the way they will learn, and even the way they will participate in future in the society. So there are other things like improvement of all aspects of the environment, industrial hygiene, prevention, treatment, and control of epidemic, endemic, and occupational and other diseases. So like the government should put in place plan on how to deal with corona without actually impacting nutrition and other aspects of life. Yeah, so currently we've been having the outbreak of diseases around. We are just coming out of corona pandemic, and yeah, so that's that. Then narrowing down to the provision of basic needs. Obviously, there's need to align civic and political rights with economic and social cultural rights. Remember, I said that human rights are interdependent and interrelated in the sense that you might give people freedom of association and all their political rights, but if you do not have food, there's a problem. So you can, like in Kenya, the research that I told you about actually found that as far as political and civil rights is concerned, Kenya is actually doing well compared to its peers, but in terms of access to social economic rights, that's where the problem is, like, because there's a lot of income inequality. So basically, there's right to access to quality health, education, nutritious and safe food, decent source of living and advancement, as mentioned in the covenant. And the Kenyan Constitution, Article 43, that is Article 43, says that every person has the right to the highest attainable standard of health, adequate housing, and freedom from hunger. Basically, it is your right to eat even tonight. Sorry for those who may not have food, but that is what the Constitution hopes for. Then, of course, the Article 6 of the Covenant I told you about is need to protect the right of all persons to work, because if you do not work, you cannot access food. Because as you know, we are living under a free market regime, at least in most countries. So there's need to actually empower people to have opportunity to work or at least generate wealth so that they can access all these rights. Because actually access to job opportunities gives you access to so many other rights. Yeah. So I think you can basically see about the policies that the government should put in place to realize all these things. Then there are also more conventions on human rights, like the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which not only focuses on human rights, but people's rights. The difference is that human rights are basically more individual, but people's rights talk about even communities and all that, and they're more social, economic, and cultural sensitive. If I can say that, the Convention on Against Discrimination of Women, a very popular one. It's also social cultural because even in conflict or generally women and children tend to suffer a lot. So that's why I highlighted those ones. But if you check our document on what I told you, what we did in 2021, the analysis of the observance of human rights in Eastern Africa, you find more of these rights and more of these conventions. So Kenya, as you know, is a relatively developed country. in terms of the context of Africa with high literacy levels. We have a mixed economy and a dynamic and innovative service industry. However, inequality abound. I think that is the main issue in Kenya because there is a lot of wealth compared at least to other countries. Like you realize that the Kenyan budget is normally actually even more than Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda combined sometimes. So that tells you that there's quite a lot of wealth internally, but inequality is the issue. For instance, there's a study by Oxfam that found that only 8,300 people own more wealth than the remaining 99.9% of Kenyans. Can you imagine that? The same study also says that 2.9 million people in the nation will live in extreme poverty in 5 years if the trend is sustained, meaning if the government or other parties do not do anything about the current situation, at least about 3 million people will be living in extreme poverty. Just to let you know, extreme poverty means that someone is living below $1 a day. So below $1 a day meaning basically you are spending less than 1 shilling. And it's just 1 shilling on everything. If you look at education, food, at the end of the day, whatever you spend is less than 1 shilling. I think that it's horrible. I think all of us should be afraid of that. Then we have another thing happening. About 1 million plus children are out of school currently in Kenya due to decline in government spending on education. So at least 1 million people, 1 million children who are school age are not in school currently because of the investment from education. Then we have at least 2.6 million will fall or remain in poverty due to ill health. So, and you know, ill health is quite connected to nutrition because most of this ill health is actually happening at the infancy level, but we have so many children who are malnutritioned and stuff like that. And even persons suffering from, or at least persons living with HIV and AIDS, yeah, you can imagine the level of nutrition they require. Then we also have limited government expenditure in human services. And I told you earlier, we are big on mega infrastructure, very small investing in our health, education, and even housing. So for instance, by the time that Corona struck, only 22 counties out of the 47 actually had functional ICU, and Corona actually was driving so many people into ICU. So you can start to imagine why we had so many people dying. Then we only had 526 ICU beds and 256 ventilators by the time Corona. Obviously, these numbers have changed by now. We also have very limited research and development. We do not invest a lot in research and development in these areas that impact human rights, especially nutrition and human services. For example, agriculture and food security. We've been having the discussion about GMO. Is it even healthy, or is it just an easy way out? Because obviously, scientific research out there have shown that there's inconclusive result as far as the impact of GMOs on the health of the people is concerned. And even have some organization like the European Union where it is banned actually to deal in GMO in Europe, and so many other countries ban it. So I think it's just maybe laziness. We do not want to do an actual research and figure out whether they're safe or not. Then, of course, the biggest challenge in Kenya is mismanagement and theft of resources at all levels of government. All of you remember COVID funds and so many dramas that I don't want to even mention here. However, there are also strides. The government is trying to move in the right direction. We have the Big Four agenda. I think one person should list for us the Big Four agenda, but remember there was food, there was housing, there was health. So those are the key areas that we're talking about socioeconomic rights. We have devolution, which is pretty much decentralization of services. And most of the counties actually deal with these critical services, like healthcare, education, especially early childhood education, which is very important. There's agriculture. So devolution is a right stride towards realizing human rights in the country. Then we have education, CBC universities, we will now have a more inclusive system of education that is more dynamic. We also have access to university and higher level education that has been expanded. Then the way forward from where I sit and from where human rights uh, uh, maybe thought process sits is that there's need for advocacy in the following areas. For example, increased government expenditure on human services. When I say human services, I just mean health, nutrition, education. They're human services because they impact directly on the well-being of the person. Unlike other services which you cannot, for example, when you invest in a road, yes, it is important because it allows someone to move around. But the if you do not have roads, is somehow you can still survive. But if you are unhealthy or you lack food or education, it has direct impact on you as a person. So that's why they're called human services. Then there's need for research, collaborations, and partnerships on knowledge production and sharing on the EU framework. For those of you who have read actually the framework of the EU and the report they have actually published on their website for today's celebration, it's very in-depth and very comprehensive. That's what I can see. So it's important for us to do research and collaborate on these things and actually figure out how we are doing. That's why the human rights research that we did last year is very important because it was also comparative. It compared how Kenya is doing versus Uganda, versus Ethiopia, versus Burundi, and that was just a case study situation. And then we have this need to speak against misappropriation of public resources because however much we talk, if money is going to be stolen, then it's like one step forward, 10 steps backward. So yeah. Then county governments, and these even can imply to local level governments in other countries, of course, Africa. Like in Nigeria, I know they have state governments. Other countries have districts and provinces and so on and so forth. They need to realize how to take up their place in human rights for development agenda. That is, because in most cases, these local level government or subnational governments, they normally deal with very pertinent issues as far as human services is concerned, like provision of water, basic education, and things like that. So I think they need to focus more and actually enhance their roles in this area. Then they need to adhere to international conventions on human rights. Yeah. So obviously, as I mentioned earlier, there are so many conventions that have been passed. African countries have accepted some, they are in the process of accepting some, they are still lagging in some, but overall, these conventions are important because they help to keep the countries accountable because there are processes, you have to write reports to the UN or the body that is mandated to actually monitor the operationalization of that particular convention. Almost sometimes even yearly, at times maybe after 2 years or 5 years. But it's good when we actually speak to our governments to actually operationalize these policies because they are very important for accountability. Yeah. Then in conclusion, what I'm saying is that the developmental agenda must have at its core fulfillment of social economic rights for productive, energetic, and dynamic population who can spur a wholesome growth and development of the nation, state, continent, and the world, and secure the future. It's like two sides of a coin. You need to empower the people to work so that they can actually develop the country. Because for the case of nutrition, for example, if children can have access to nutritious food, good healthcare, proper education, decent housing, these same children will come out and actually develop the country even more. That's what I'm saying. So that's why if a country is in a cycle of not being able to provide these freedoms and human rights to its citizens, the country will pretty much stay back, lag behind the rest. That's what's happening in countries like maybe Somalia because there is there's a gap, there's state collapse. So most children are going without food or they're uneducated. And if you remain in the same state for like 10 years, of course, there's a lot that may go wrong. And that's what I think the developed world has been actually taking advantage of, because they started with empowering the people, and now the people are able to drive the economy. Yeah, and that's my presentation today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope I kept time, or if I didn't keep, it was just by a bit. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Maureen. We really enjoyed to learn more about human rights and the research that you did. And yes, you went overboard, but it was a worthy cause. Thank you very much for your presentation. So I would like to welcome Luke quickly. You have 15 minutes. Then now we go to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you too. So thank you very much, moderator, for the opportunity to share some information with our colleagues online who are viewing us, especially the young African social workers and the rest. And of course, I want to also thank my fellow panelists for the good presentation they have so far really presented to us. So my name is Dr. Tracy J. I'm from Uganda, and I am a social worker by profession and training. And I've been this for the last 10 years, working with young people in areas of sexual reproductive health and livelihoods programming and life skills empowerment for young people and adolescents. And I'm really glad to be part of this engagement this afternoon. But maybe to add, I'm also, at present, I'm a student of Masters in Human Rights at Uganda Matters University. So my task this evening is to really look at the role of social work in advancing human rights concerns in our societies or around the globe. And dear listeners, as you may be aware, as social workers, basically the way we are trained, we are supposed to empower communities, to empower people in our communities for the better. We know there are a lot of challenges in our communities that need to be addressed, and it is our duty as social workers to really tackle them and empower our people for the better. So, of course, human rights is really a social work concern, and as a human rights profession with social justice, as one of the core values, social work profession seeks to respond and challenge the unjust and unstable, as well as to perpetuate injustice, any form of injustices and violence in our society. So as social workers in our profession, we always endeavor to empower communities to identify problems that are in our societies and empower our community members to overcome them. And what is interesting about our profession that we don't give them solutions. For us, we guide them and they're able to identify these problems and eventually they find solutions by themselves. So that's how unique social work profession is. And as we do this, you realize we are actually addressing human rights concern. If you, dear viewers, if you have read through the SGDs, you note that actually all SGDs tackle a number of human rights, as my predecessor discussed with us. A number of human rights are really addressed through those SGDs. So social work as a profession, it aims to maximize the development of human potential and the fulfillment of human rights and needs. And really, and we see that this highlights that respect for human dignity and diversity are values at the core of social work and human rights issues that we address. So social work is really a profession that aims at helping those who cannot help themselves. You know, as social workers, we are supposed to be advocates. We are supposed to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And as we do that, we enable them to understand some of the issues that affect them, and most of them are human rights, and we're able to tackle them. So being a caring profession, it is the duty of the social worker to find out the root causes of the vulnerability of the clients or the people in our communities. And also, we also note that social work profession strives to promote dignity and worth of all people, regardless of their political and economic status, as well as religious affiliation. In our profession, we don't segregate. We empower everyone from different walks of life, depending on the issues that are at hand. So the profession really show that it shows the commitment to the enhancement of the quality of life and the development of the full potential of the people in our communities. And for us, we normally call them clients, by addressing the barriers, the inequalities, the injustices that exist in our society. And of course, I may not repeat what my colleague said. When we talk of human rights, there is a lot we can talk about: the issues of torture, issues of violence, issues of rape, issues of extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances. All these issues, social work profession handles them in a way that will that empowers people to understand them, and they're able to really prevent and avoid them from happening in societies. Talk about peace and empowerment. If I can give an example of the war in Ukraine and Russia invading Ukraine, we have a number of social workers in Ukraine trying to support people who have been hit, who have sustained injuries, and so on. So social work profession plays a big role in the construct and building and peace building in society, where issues of human rights and other inequalities have been identified. And that's why we also have the form of social work called development social work. And this is all about empowering communities so that they're able to address the issues they are faced with. So we also see that the profession, social work profession, believes that all people have the right to self-determination, which enables them to, or which enables us to work out our own development priorities, goals, and directions, with, of course, peace dimensions, like I said, and this promotes self-confidence and hope. If someone is faced with a challenge and a social worker comes in to support this person, the person gets to understand better this challenge and comes out with a solution how this challenge can be addressed. So this is really very important, as social work practice also plays a fundamental role in building resilience, support, and constructive social relationships at both individual and institutional levels, in an effort to develop peace in communities and also empower our community members for the better. So social workers can support, or we have already supported, institutions. For instance, for me, where I have been working from at Straito Foundation, we have been always going to school to support young people who are faced with issues of rape, issues of violence, and so on. So social workers come out to support these people to have their welfare improved, but also support institutions where these people are to keep the engagement on, even when social workers are out of that environment. So we note that the social work profession shares a close relationship with human rights at all levels, because it adheres to values such as respect, dignity, and self-determination. So the values that are strongly embedded in the code of ethics of all practitioners. So for us, we cut across. You will always find a social worker in all aspects of life, in different departments. Social workers will always be there, and our role is to help people and support them to overcome the challenges that they go through. So the profession is highly regarded for challenging the inhumane treatment of vulnerable people, its commitment to challenging and oppressive practices, and most importantly, ensuring that vulnerable people are given voice. So that's what we do. That's what the profession does. It gives people the voice. We encourage them to speak up. If they are faced with challenges, if someone, if a certain girl got raped or defiled, we encourage them to come out and speak about these issues so that they don't happen again, and also bring the perpetrators to book and face the wrath of the law. So human rights are particularly important for social workers when making decisions that concern the future care needs of individuals. So that's how interconnected, that's how human rights and social work profession are interconnected. So I may not find the human rights again. My colleague, of course, talked about them, but maybe I can just briefly talk about human rights, which are really commonly understood as inalienable fundamental rights to which a person is inherently entitled simply because he or she is a human being. We enjoy these human rights because we are human beings. And human rights are thus conceived as universal. So they're applicable everywhere and the same for everyone. So as social workers, in our profession, the profession activity of helping individuals, groups, communities enhance or restore their capacity for social work functioning and creating society conditions favorable to this goal is our duty, and that's how we do it. So social work in its various forms addresses the multiple complex transactions between people and their environments. We also see that it's especially when it enables all people to develop their full potential and enrich their lives and prevent dysfunction. So professionally, social work profession is focused on problem solving and change. So in most cases, we are called change makers because we always strive to make the environment where people live the better. Okay. So social work, we see that social work practice promotes and safeguards a just society and defends the rights and interests of vulnerable citizens. And here, when we talk about vulnerable citizens, we are talking about, for instance, refugees, we're talking about women, we're talking about young people, we're talking about young people living with disabilities, the elderly, and so on. Social work ensure that the rights of these people and the life of these people is made, is improved for the better, so they're able to enjoy themselves while they're still on this planet. We also note that actually this profession of ours, it must be the best, I must say, because it accepts its share of responsibility for working to oppose and eliminate all violations of human rights. Like I said, as social workers, when we are doing our duty to help people get from worse to better, we are actually addressing all sorts of human rights indirectly. So some of us may not be able to note that, but we are actually always addressing human rights issues in that form. So social work has, from its conception, being a human rights profession and having as its basic tenet the intrinsic value of every human being, and as one of its main aims, the promotion of equitable social structures which can offer people security and development, which uphold the dignity, the people's dignity, and so on. So you may note that actually many professions, social work practitioners are conscious that their concerns are closely linked to respect of human rights. They accept the premise that human rights and fundamental freedoms are indivisible, and therefore that the full realization of civic and political rights is impossible without the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights. So like my colleague explained, all these rights spread across political, social, and cultural perspectives. We address them in those lines as social workers in our profession. So human rights are really inseparable from social work theory. You may note that, but also values and ethics and practice. So advocacy of such rights must therefore be integral part of social work. And even if in countries living under authoritarian regimes, I can give an example of ours here in Uganda, then Rwanda, social workers have continuously done advocacy to have these issues addressed and have social work profession acceptable and considered in our societies. So as we do this, there are some principles that we must follow that help us achieve human rights, but also serve our people better. And one of them is that social work profession considers every human being as a unique value, which justifies more consideration for that person, but also it takes it that each individual has the right to self-fulfillment to the extent that it does not encroach upon the same rights of others and has an obligation to contribute to the well-being of society. So each member in the society, no matter how they are, whether poor, whether rich, educated, non-educated, old, young, they have the responsibility and duty they can play into their society to ensure development and growth. We also note that social workers have a commitment to principles of social justice. That's what we fight for. We ensure justice in all and everything we do, so that people are able to enjoy their communities in a way that is really appropriate. So social work profession also has it that the responsibility to devote objective and disciplined knowledge and skill to work with individuals, groups, communities, and societies in the development and resolution of personal societal conflicts and their consequences, but also empowers social workers and expects them to provide the best possible assistance without unfair discrimination on the basis of gender, age, disability, race, color, language, religion, affiliations, or political beliefs, property, or sexual orientation, status, and social class. So everyone is respected and supported as they come. So we also note that social work as a profession empowers us as social workers to respect the basic human rights of individuals and groups as expressed in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as my colleague explained before, and other international conventions derived from that declaration. So there are so many principles we can talk about that social workers and social work profession provides to enable societies and communities grow and develop. There are so many, but I may not really discuss all of them. I implore our members and viewers there to cross-check and find out more and have them, you get to understand them. So we note that these principles are drawn from our experience as social workers in carrying our responsibility and mandate in our societies, help people in our communities and societies and individuals, whether individuals or in groups, to solve problems that we are faced with, but also place a special responsibility on the social work profession to advance the cause of human rights throughout the world. So as social workers, we deal with common human needs, and that's why we are always in our communities, support them, to help them identify their needs and be able to come up with solutions, but also help them prevent or alleviate individual, group, or community problems, and to improve the quality of life for everyone in societies or in our communities. And in doing so, we seek to uphold the rights of the individuals or groups with whom we work with or we work for. So as I conclude, it is important to note that social work profession, of course, with reference to the global standards in social work profession, as it identifies the core purposes of social work in the global context. These clearly show how social work promotes the realization of human rights and, of course, address the issues that people face in communities. For instance, social workers facilitate the inclusion of marginalized, social excluded, and disposed, vulnerable, and at-risk groups of people. Talk about sex workers, talk about young people living with disabilities, the elderly, and so on. But also, this profession tries to address and challenge barriers, inequalities, and injustices that exist in society. We also note that social work profession, it forms short and long-term working relations with and mobilizes individuals, families, groups, and organizations and communities to enhance their well-being and their problem-solving capabilities. You go to community, you engage them, they identify the solution they are faced, the problem they are faced with, and they come up with solutions and how they can solve them. And what is interesting with social work is that when you engage these people in their communities and they understand the problem they are faced with, they always have solutions how to solve these problems. So when you engage them and you guide them well, the issues will be sorted. Social work profession also plays a cardinal role in formulating and implementing policies and programs that enhance people's well-being, promoting development and human rights, and collective social harmony and societal stability, and in our communities. So it also encourages people to engage in advocacy with regard to patient, to pertinent local, national, regional, and international concerns. We have always had issues that social workers have always raised, issues that have to do with teenage pregnancy, child marriage, female genital mutilation. Those issues, we have had them being raised by social workers at all levels, be it local, regional, or international levels. And that's how we empower, the profession empowers people to get out of those bad practices like female genital mutilation and protect our girls from that pain and suffering they go through for the better. Then social work profession and social workers, of course, we promote respect for traditions, cultures, ideologies, beliefs, and religious among different groups and societies. Insofar as these do not conflict with the fundamental human rights of people. So we play a big role in ensuring that our societies can respect or ensure the cultural beliefs that are positive to our people, but those which pose danger to our people, we also engage them to see how we can have them eliminated. Social work profession also plays a very big role in planning and organizing, administering and managing programs and organizations dedicated to any of the purposes declinated in the above engagements, like I said before. So in conclusion, it's always important to note that, of course, when it comes to to respecting human rights and promoting them, the governments bear the primary responsibility. However, it's also important that every individual owes it to themselves and their communities to promote human rights. That can seem like a challenging task, but there are many, many ways we can do this, whether you are in a society or in a country where there is authoritarianism. There are some ways we can do to really protect and ensure that human rights advanced. For instance, you can connect with human rights movements and ensure that these issues are raised and solutions are sought. You can vote. Those of us who always have regular elections, not for purposes of those who always have regular elections, you can make sure that when you're voting, you vote people who are going to promote human rights in your society or in your community. But also where there are inequalities and you see them, let's try to raise our voice. Let's try to raise the occasion and protest these inequalities and fight them so that we can have an environment where everyone is able to enjoy and celebrate and really be proud of their society. Lastly, we can take action against any form of discrimination regarding human rights, whether you are young, whether you are old, educated, uneducated. We need to have a community that works for each and every one of us. And the way we can achieve this is by raising the occasion and be able to talk about issues that we face and be able to really have an environment that is supportive to all of us and which we can always be proud of from now and for the generations to come. Thank you very much. That's what I can share with colleagues and viewers listening out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Luke. That was quite comprehensive on the role of social workers in advancing human rights concern in the society. So we have about 9 minutes to end the presentation. So we will go straight to the chat box. And we have a few questions in the chat box. And I will read. Movin had asked Banjul, where is Banjul? So Banjul is the capital city of Gambia. I've posted it there. And that is where the African Commission of Human Rights and People's Rights is best. Thank you for that. So Bernard is asking, what is the role of young people in advancing human rights in the continent? So I'll quickly just go through all the questions, then we can contribute. Then Christine is asking that some people asked what the roles of a social worker, or what roles a social worker performs in a hospital. Thank you for that question, Christine. I don't know, sorry, she has left, but we will also talk about it briefly. Then Movin, a question to you. What options are there for citizens to access basic rights in the state that government is not respecting the basic standards set to advance human rights? And the last question to Emmanuel, how can social workers advance human rights to IDPs in a non-cohesive states? Movin has also shared his research, so we can quickly click on that link before it disappears. So maybe we can quickly go through the questions. Let's start with Movin. What options are there for citizens to access basic rights in a state that government is not respecting the basic standards set to advance human rights?
Good to see you. So the options that the citizens in a country that is not, maybe the government is not adhering to the human rights regime as set in the international system. Of course, one of them is what we are doing right now, is continuous dialogue on the way forward. But clearly, there is need for advocacy in that situation, and of course, the civil society, with the social workers movement, and all other civic engagement players, like maybe human rights activists. That's their work, actually, advocacy, continuous advocacy. The citizens also have the choice of engaging international stroke multilateral organizations like the United Nations and other foreign entities like foreign states to keep the countries accountable. I can give an example of here in Kenya. You remember the movement towards multi-democracy in the country, but there was continuous push by people like Wangari Maathai, you know them, all those people who continuously push the government. And of course, they collaborated with foreign countries, some of them organizations like we have Amnesty International, Transparency International, Human Rights Watch. So there's that collaboration that has to happen. And in the context of Africa, we also have the option of the African Union. We have actually a court, I think it's called African Court of Human Rights Court, something like that. So there's so many avenues to engage, but the most important avenue is actually the citizens themselves continue pushing. I will not try to push whichever way they want to use to push as long as it's legitimate, because in the Kenyan constitution, the ultimate sovereignty actually belongs to the people. So if it's a country that there is need for maybe civil participation, if there is need for even maybe arms, I don't know, it depends, because in our first recently we've had coup. If the end goal is to attain human rights, I think I will say go for it, as long as it's actually popular activity. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that wonderful contribution. But let me just chip in something. You know, as it depends on where we actually belong, as the case may be. For example, a social worker is different from human rights activist, and a social worker at the same time can be a human rights activist. So depending on where you belong, and activism generally is a non-violent activity, because protest, as the case may be, is constitutional. So it's well respected globally. So the taking of arms is not an option if you are not an armed, armed personnel, and an activist is not like that. And even if you follow, maybe during war, or as the case may be, as an activist, you may not be permitted to carry arms, as the case may be. So I think what's it called, bearing of arms may not truly been out of it. And another thing that I would like to chip in specifically is that, it depends on what we are actually practicing in that particular state, because except we want to deceive ourselves in Africa, there are still some nations in Africa that they've not yet transited fully into democracy. And some countries that think they are practicing democracy, it's not yet a democracy. They are still in transition, from autocracy, from monarchy to dictatorship, from dictatorship to the democracy. So even they acclaim a democratic state. For instance, in Nigeria, there are some situations that you will see like this. You can't actually believe that, are we truly practicing democracy? Where do we belong? So depending on where you belong, that is when you know what to do as a human rights activist. And another thing is that I always like to challenge the civil society organization and NGO. We are not actually doing enough, to be sincere, most especially in Africa. And most the one that are actually doing something, at times they tend to be politicized. For instance, you will see somebody call himself I'm a civil rights activist, I'm a human rights activist, but behind the door, you will still see the same person going after one politician or the other. So this is a challenge to all of us. Where do we belong? If you want to participate in politics, I think that aspect of human rights activism may not actually bring what the expected outcome. So we should always challenge ourselves in that regard. So that is my contribution in terms of our citizens. And at times, it is in Africa that we will select a bad leader. Then at the end of the day, we'll be blaming the bad leader for not performing. So what are the processes of recruiting people that represent us at different levels? You will see the issue of food buying, the issue of violence. You will even see people telling you that by fire, by force, I will win this election. And they will do everything possible, including violence, to win this election. When things like this happen, you can predict what will happen. When you become a leader or a president or a governor through guns, and you can truly guarantee that anybody that wants to go against that person, it will normally use the gun to distract that person and get the person out of the road. So that is my own contribution. We should checkmate the way we elect and recruit our leader that represent us. So I think there is still more to do in terms of electoral education in Africa. There is more to do. Electoral education, and all this thing has to do with electoral literacy. Many people are not, if you ask an average person that, what do you understand by good governance? What do you understand by the civil rights? What do you understand by civil responsibility? These are all key issues when it comes to human rights, democracy, and development. But some of these issues are not well taught to our people. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. So we have 5 minutes to conclude. And maybe, Mayaka, could you please take over from there? Yeah.
I think the question I needed to respond to.
Okay, yes, please look. Yes.
She asked about the roles of a social worker in a hospital setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so as a social worker, when you're in a hospital, there are some things you can do. For instance, you initiate screening and evaluation of patients and their families. When a patient comes, you take up that load to keep monitoring the patient and engage his or her families on how this patient is faring. But also a social worker in a hospital setting performs comprehensive psychosocial assessment of the patient, and where possible, you can give them counseling, you can encourage them that as you are here, all will be well, so that they are able, they can appreciate. Sometimes someone can go to hospital, not because this person is bad off, but this person is lacking some comfort and that kind of psychosocial support. So you encourage them and make them feel at home. But also, social work and hospital setting can help these patients and families to understand the illness and treatment options, as well as consequences of various treatments. So you help them understand the medication are going to be given, how it works, how it will help this person to get better, how long it will take. So that kind of role is what someone does in a hospital setting. Of course, there are many roles, but I am just mentioning a few because of time. Thank you.
Time. Thank you very much. Yeah, and I think to add on that also, we are the ones who are the link between the patient and the community, especially when it comes to paying the bills, when it comes to, looking for someone who can be the support of this patient in the hospital. So maybe Mayaka, next time we can look at the roles of social workers in the different, in education, in medical field and the different fields, so that those young social workers that are coming up can also look at the different options that we have when it comes to being a social worker. Thank you. Back to you, Mayaka.
Well, colleagues, thank you so much for these wonderful contributions. And unfortunately, we do not have the luxury of the time where we could be able to continue with this wonderful session. However, it will be very important to get one statement from each one of you on how can we move forward, in particularly as young people, in advancing on the role on advancing human rights, access to all the citizens in our locality or in our communities. And kindly put it in one sentence, no, not a paragraph, just one sentence. So, Luke, what can you say about that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Maka. From where I stand, I know most of young people don't even understand human rights. They don't understand that actually they have them. So what is important is that we should first acquaint ourselves with these human rights. We know that I have human rights X and comes with responsibility Y. So if we are able to understand these human rights and appreciate them, then we shall be able to advance them, because they will be part and parcel of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is a wonderful way of parting shot. Anyway, Marvin, what would you say? What is your parting shot in this discussion?
Thanks so much, Mayaka. I think for me, from where I sit, the most important thing is about the people. Let me just clarify what I said earlier. I didn't literally mean arms. I just said like what happened in Sri Lanka. When it comes to the end, it's about the people. So human rights, as the word is, it's human, it's your right. So you have the right to go for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marvin. And you are doing a great job. I've had a lot of your work. Keep up with the same spirit. Emmanuel, it is glad to meet you and listen to your point of view. So what is your parting shot on particularly we as young people, and how can we advance this in our communities?
All right, thank you very much. It has been a very lovely and great day. I've actually learned a lot, and I look forward for another remarkable day like this. We have a lot of days in Africa to celebrate, so I look forward to such a webinar coming again and again. We need more of this, so that is what I have to say. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be part of this. So, and for us, I believe that we can still achieve, as a social worker, we can achieve it in ensuring that human rights is being propagated well across African nations. So one thing is that we should continue to connect together. For instance, I'm from Nigeria, and looking at all these names, I think you people are not from Nigeria, but since you people are from Africa, you also have the blood of Nigeria in you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. This is the essence of this network, that we spread the positive vibe in our continent, and we really hope that with such conversations we can be able to reach to a wider population. However, as we said, we have to start with the baby steps and speak to one person or your immediate neighbor, your brother, your sister, so that this can be able to reach to everybody. We all know that it is our basic right to have a healthy, to live in a healthy society, to have a peaceful cohesion in our community. We are, however, not accessing this because most of the people that, or most of our committee members, do not know that this is their right. So if we are able to advance this and remind them, because probably they forgot or they don't know, so just reminding every citizen that you have a right to every basic rights generally, then they will be able to know the avenues they can be able to use in terms of accessing these, regardless of the situation that they live in. So I want to thank you all, Emmanuel,
Before that,
Robin,
please.
Luke, and Sharon, for
Yes.
coming on board and share with us from a different perspective. You see, we have a Kenyan, we have a Ugandan, we have a Nigerian, and from those who are following us live, it's continental. So thank you so much. Let us keep up with the same spirit. And even as we enter to the weekend, I want to wish you all a wonderful and fantastic weekend. Until when we meet again for another conversation, may the good Lord be with you.
Sharon had something to say. Sharon has something to say.
Yeah, yes. Okay, sorry. I know we are bad with time, but we have two people who have really followed the conversation, Tevin Zay and Kariuki. I don't know whether they have something to say before we finish. Tevin, Kariuki? Your time is over. So, okay, for me, I was looking at the impact of social media in advancing the human rights aspect. And, you know, we can use TikTok. We can use, you know, these things that really pull young people into learning stuff about human rights and about social work. Then I was also looking at who are the most affected when it comes to human rights. Is it women? Is it girls? Is it so? That is the approach I'm thinking about as you end. Back to you, Mayaka. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. We have just begun, so the conversation is going on. Let us continue with the conversation online, and probably we shall meet again soon to advance further, because there are various platforms and channels and avenues we can be able to use in advancing these, as you mentioned. And also there are human rights subject is a very wide subject. We cannot substantially conclude this discussion in 1.5 hours. So we should be able to continue this conversation